Welcome to the Scholarly Speaking event and program of 2011. Thank you all for coming to the 6th annual program. And the reason why we enjoy this event so much is because we believe the Prescott campus authors deserve public recognition, and we are honored to provide you a celebration to you. I'm Sarah Thomas, Director of the Haase Library and Learning Center, and I'd like to have Dr. Bloom give a little welcome.
Can we have some applause for the Director of the Haase Library? It's because of her that we have the event. I'd like to talk relatively briefly about why it's important. That's what I'd like to do. If you go back to the beginning of human history, regardless of culture or geographical origin or anything like that, you find that people have been dealing with the identical short list of basic questions. And I'm going to go through what those questions are and point out that each question is related to what at least one person in the room here has done in terms of their own scholarly production. The first one has to do with epistemology. How do we know anything? And what's the nature of knowledge? And there are a lot of people here who specialize in research methods and applied mathematical approaches to try to answer a question like that. Another area is metaphysics, which means two different things. It can mean the nature of reality, and many of our scientific types here try to do that, but many of our humanities-oriented people do as well. Or it can be just looking at the nature of reality beyond the physical. Then we have questions dealing with ethics, what's right and what's wrong, what should be done, what shouldn't be done. And we have folks exploring that as well. We have the world of aesthetics, dealing with what is beautiful, what isn't, what's meaningful, what isn't, what's of more value than other cultural products. We have people working on that. We have people dealing with political philosophy. What's the best government, the worst government, why do people need government, how do people come together and develop cultural practices, that kind of thing. And finally, the philosophy of religion, questions dealing with whether there's a God or not, what it means to make a statement like that. And we have people working in that area as well. It's really interesting to me, and I hope it is to you as well, that regardless of what era you're looking at, what part of the world you're looking at, same questions come up. And people feel they're not fully human until they try to answer them in their own way. So that's why this is special. You're carrying on a tradition that goes back as long as there've been humans, and I think that's a very special kind of thing. And again, I'd like to thank Director Thomas over here for getting all of this started 5-6 years ago. So at this point, I think we're going to begin recognizing individuals by the time-honored practice of alphabetical order. Is that correct? So I'll turn things back over to Director Thomas.
We're almost there. I'd like to thank the committee members, Joanne Evanoff, who's the chair, and this really was her brainstorm many years ago. And Suzanne DeLong, Evelyn Harris, Kathy Hill, Susie Roth, and Pat Watkins for all of their hard work. And we believe it's important for librarians and faculty to work together to recognize the scholarship that occurs on this campus. This year we have produced a bibliography with 27 authors. After the program, we will add your publications to the special collections. The citations were included only for the calendar year 2010 from those authors who provided the citations to us. This isn't a complete list, and there are many authors that were not included. Today, I'm excited to present those authors who have published works or papers presented in the year 2010. When I call your name, please come up to the front to celebrate your publications with a certificate of recognition from the library. Please hold your applause to the end. Okay, Quintin Bailey. Gravitational lensing and light bending as tests of Lorentz symmetry, violation with an asymmetric tensor, gravity couplings in the standard model extension, Lorentz violating Gravito, electromagnetism, new tests of general relativity.
I told Dr. Bailey he'll have to think of a catchier title next time.
Next time we'll have the authors read their title.
I'll explain all that.
Okay. Jamie Beatty, please. Challenges of the GSIS Chinese content courses. Sally Bloomstrom. Assessing service learning and public relations to improve instruction. Identifying teacher effectiveness using student skills surveys, speech evaluations, and quiz scores to inform instruction.
You can tell she's way too humble. She left before we finished reading.
Richard Bloom. Fear of flying, globalization, security, and terrorism. Are you down with PPP? A look at prohibited personnel practices in the United States government. Aviation terrorism interview. Enhanced airport security interview. The November 2010 elections, verification and nuclear weapons reduction. Psychologists gone wild, the politics of scientific psychology. Truth and trust, trek or trick. Book review, deception from ancient empires to internet dating. Under the volcano, the Eyjafjallajökull eruptions, globalization and lessons learned. Spy High, the secret of secret Russian agents.
The internet dating was the fun one.
And David Grandstein, effective transitions into higher education. Leanne Chen. Okay, Stacy DeVoe. Okay, Nick Devereaux, and I need to read this because I looked this up. The origin of the Hubble sequence in the lambda cold dark matter cosmology. Okay, James Doyle.
I think the physics people need to take COM 122 to get the titles better.
And he has 3 patents. James Heldling. Okay, Dorothea. She's not here. Curtis James. WRF EMS simulation of the Pearl Harbor Day windstorm, in-flight convective weather avoidance. And Eileen Landis-Groom. Boundaries, our class. Learning about horses, rethinking my teaching.
Look into the cameras.
David Lanny. And Wahyu, she's here, she's a speaker. Okay, Wahyu Lestari, fatigue damage identification in composite structures through ultrasonics and wavelet transformed signal processing. Laboratory-based course in aerospace engineering failure, unique undergraduate laboratory-based course in engineering failure, laboratory-based undergraduate course in engineering failure.
Data manipulation? No. Got you anyway.
Okay. Douglas McGrath. Doug, I saw you. Okay. Multi-level class, reading skills and culture, book review, Achen Wasalan, functional modern standard Arabic for beginners, the multi-level ESL classroom.
Okay.
And Nika Nordbrock is in Florida, unable to come today. Brian Nordstrom. I saw Brian. There he is. Periodic table of the elements, alkali and alkaline earth elements, periodic table of the elements, halogens and noble gases, periodic table of the elements, metals and metalloids, periodic table of the elements, non-metals.
I'd like to point out how things have changed. When I went to school, we only had 3 periodic elements. Now we have
Actually, there were 4 when you went to school. They were called earth, air, fire, and water.
Actually, he's incorrect. It was earth, wind, and fire.
Okay, Ed who did, Ed's not here. Okay, John Ed Post. I saw Ed Post come here. He's my neighbor. Just lives just right up from me. Okay, on maximizing the tuning range of SA-NE 602 IC coal pits oscillators.
Good.
Mark Sinclair, something he can come. Lance isn't here. Stephanie's not here. Isa, Brad Wall, Lee Yong. Okay, in search of a homeland, the transnational journey of Lai Non and her family across the U.S.-Mexican border. Li Wei Quan, Chinese grocer, in Chinese. Li Wei Quan, Chinese grocer, in Tucson, 1917 to 1965. The lifelong journey of Li Non, sojourning and settlement. Maya Lin and the controversy behind her Vietnam Veterans Memorial design. The vicissitudes of Tucson's Chinatowns. We served with pride the Chinese American World War II veterans in Tucson. Okay, Hong Zhan. Using virtual reality space and training Mandarin pre-service teachers, an innovative method. Integrating Second Life into Chinese language teacher training program, a pilot study. Enhancing teaching and learning with digital storytelling. A cyber collaboration model to promote teaching and learning, Mandarin Chinese in Second Life, a pilot study, student perspectives of learning Chinese in Second Life. So let's give them thank you, Dr. Lee. For several years after we started this event, we invited guest speakers from the outside. But last year we made a change and invited one faculty from each college to give a summary of their research, writing, and publishing experiences. Our own faculty speakers were very well received last year, so we started that again, continued that again this year. This year, Dr. Bailey, Dr. James, and Dr. Lestari have graciously accepted to be our guest speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Quintin Bailey from the Space Physics Department in the College of Arts and Sciences. His research area focuses on the theoretical and experimental aspects of testing Lorentz symmetry and the space-time symmetry of special and general relativity. Dr. Bailey.
So, wasn't quite sure what to talk about today, but I wanted to at least give you kind of a flavor for research and what my take on publishing. So, I'm a theoretical physicist, so I'm going to try to tell you what that means and what I do. So, a math grad student once asked me, so you're a physicist, do you sit around and like postulate? No, that's not exactly what we do these days. So gone are the days of just sitting around and postulating, with one exception, and that's what we call crackpot physicists. Still trying to do that. So gone are those days of just sitting around and postulating. In fact, now there's such a big volume of knowledge in physics that we have to confront that. We can think of modern fundamental physics as two things. One is called general relativity. That's Einstein's theory of gravity. So this is gravity over here. And the other one is called the standard model of particle physics. And that's the theory of the very small, if you like. And that controls all of the other forces that we know about. So we have gravity and all the three other forces that we know about. And these are the two giants of physics that we have. There's a lot of theoretical ideas that go along with this. So this is really a huge thing. It's not enough to just come up with simple equations anymore. So sitting around and postulating, that's not quite what I do. I build on existing work, what we already know. So what do I actually do? Well, a lot of it is sitting down and calculating things with a pen and paper. And sometimes it does end up like this. We have a big stack of theories and no proofs. I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not good at proofs. So what I actually work on, what I actually do, is I'm interested in tests of Einstein's theory of gravity, which is called general relativity, which you might have heard of. And so the first thing I want to tell everyone is that this is not so far out there. So I want to answer this question: what does general relativity have to do with reality? So let me give you a practical case where we actually use general relativity every day. This is a question that I ask to my modern physics students. It's a course that I teach, PS 303. I asked them this question in the beginning of the class to kind of give them a taste of what we talk about in the class. And that's the following. If you have clocks on the Earth and clocks on a GPS satellite, they run at different rates. So the question is, relative to clocks on Earth, clocks on a GPS satellite run, is it slower by 5 seconds, faster by 5 seconds, slower by 39 microseconds, faster by 39 microseconds, or do they run at exactly the same rate? So let's take a poll. Let's see. Raise your hand if you think it's A. Just take a wild guess if you have no idea. Okay, we got a couple people for A. How about B? Okay, a few for B. How about C? Even more for C. How about D? 1 for D. D is the correct answer. We got one. I came from the chair of the physics department. So clocks on GPS satellites actually run slower, and that's because of Einstein's general relativity predicts that clocks further away from the Earth will run faster. And clocks closer to the Earth will run slower, and that's because of the big mass of the Earth, which is curving space-time. It affects the ticking rates of clocks. And anyone who relies on GPS should know that if they did not take this into account, you'd have very serious problems with your navigation. So this is really important.
39 milliseconds.
39 microseconds, it really doesn't matter. If you got something moving really fast, that can make a difference. So that gives you an idea that general relativity could play a role in your everyday life. So what I'm interested in is I'm actually looking for physics beyond Einstein's general relativity. And I've had some undergraduate students working with me. I have 2 listed here. Those are the ones that stuck around. I've had a number of them approach me and asked to do research. Some of them, 2 of them at least stuck around, and the others kind of wandered off and did other things. One of them is Eric Lentz, who graduated a couple of years ago. He worked on a project with me involving gravity waves. And the other one is Rondale So, who's a junior right now. And he's working on a project involving bending of light. It's another prediction of Einstein's general relativity. And we're actually Rondale and I are actually putting together a publication to submit to a peer-reviewed journal currently. Hopefully we'll get that done soon. So just to give you a flavor for what I work on, here's what I think of as a very simple equation that I work with. It's simple to me because it fits on 1 page. Now I'm not going to try to explain what that equation means. I'll just say that the bottom line was my PhD thesis. And actually a number of PhD theses have come out of this one equation. So instead of actually talking about equations, because many of you are not in physics or in related fields, I want to give you a qualitative sense of what my research is about. So I want to give you an example of something I did previously, and something hopefully everyone can visualize. So hopefully you can see these little green arrows in this picture here. In the center is the Earth, and the green arrows represent the gravitational field of the Earth, which, because the Earth is very close to a perfect sphere, it's what we call isotropic. It doesn't depend on direction. It's the same in all directions. So it just points towards the Earth. So that's what the green arrows are supposed to be depicting. And that's the answer according to Newton and Einstein. And so some work that I did a few years back was to show that in certain alternative theories of gravity that are not general relativity, you get something different. You get kind of a distorted picture of these green arrows, and there's some directional dependence here. so that was essentially a prediction of something that you might look for in an experiment. And a group, well, I'll talk about it in a minute, but a group from Harvard actually did the analysis and tried to search for this effect. Let me show you what this would do to the orbit of the moon. So there's this great tool out there called lunar laser ranging. They have lasers now that they can fire at the moon. They reflect off of panels that were placed on the moon by the Apollo astronauts. So you can send a laser pulse out, get it back, and measure the time, how long it takes. From that you can infer the distance. So you can do that. It's called lunar laser ranging. And this is what you would see if these alternative theories of gravity, not general relativity, were correct. You would see the moon actually slow down in parts of its orbit and speed up in other parts. Whereas normally it would just move around along the silver circle. You can see that it's a normal orbit.
It slows down twice.
Yeah, it slows down twice. And this is one of the effects that I worked out with a pen and paper, calculating and published it. And a group from Harvard analyzed this and published a paper on it. Now they didn't find any evidence for this effect, but they were able to place strong constraints on any types of deviations from general relativity like this. So to give you another example, hopefully will be somewhat familiar to you. On the Earth, we're all aware of gravity. And normally, gravitational field on the surface of the Earth points straight down. Okay? That's why things fall straight down. So one of the predictions that I made was that, in fact, gravitational field on the surface of the Earth would rotate around in a circle as the day goes by. So this is like a daily occurrence. And so it rotates around really slowly. And you can actually see this if you get a very sensitive experiment, or you might be able to see this if you get a very sensitive experiment. And so, again, a different group, one from Berkeley, searched for this effect using what's called an atom interferometer, a fancy device for measuring gravity on the Earth's surface. And they didn't find any evidence for this effect, but again, they were able to place constraints on the size of such an effect like that. And they published it in Physical Review Letters a few years back. And I just wanted to point out the name here, Chu. That's actually Stephen Chu, the secretary of the head of the Department of Energy. So this was before he went to Washington, I believe, back in 2008. But he still appears on papers. He's not doing his job. I don't know. So that just gives you some qualitative idea of what I do. And like I said, so far, Einstein is right, so it's probably back. So now that I said that, let me just say something brief about scholarly publication in physics. So the big journals that I think about are, well, first of all, there's Nature. If you get a paper in there, that's pretty good. And there's Physical Review Letters and Physical Review, A through E. And that's the journals that are in red are actually ones that the library has a subscription to. The other ones, I think. The other ones you can get very nicely, very quickly through interlibrary loan. So it's a very nice thing. So you can publish in peer-reviewed journals, or you can publish conference proceedings, but those usually aren't peer-reviewed. So those are the two options that you have. Another thing that I really like about the physics community is that you can go give a talk at a conference at any time, even if you don't have a publication. You can just talk about something you did 10 years ago. And I don't think that's always the case in other fields. So that's a very nice thing about physics. So to conclude here, I just want to say I'm looking forward to the QEP initiative, which is the Embry-Riddle Center for Undergraduate Research, some title like that. I think I got that right. And you can think of this as kind of an umbrella under which we can pursue all of the research activities that we do, particularly with students. So faculty-student research, external grants, maybe postgrads, visiting collaborators and speakers, and travel to conferences. So that's all I have, so thank you for listening.
Quintin?
Yes.
I'd just like to bring up with the slide we're looking at right now. It's only today that this is a plan, and President Johnson actually looked at a package that's been developed that includes that, and it looks like it's really going to happen. And Dr. Bailey over here is the leader of the Prescott group that got the package to President Johnson for him to react favorably to today. So there's a lot of good momentum going in this direction.
Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
I did have a question. You said on a couple of the papers that you had written, they were reviewed or tested by some other groups, and that they
wrote
concluded there were
separate papers.
constraints. I didn't know what you meant by that. What was their conclusion
Well, it's
regarding
a
your
little
papers?
tricky to explain, but
Very simple.
I'll try. So I came up with something that, a formula they could match to, basically. And in that formula, there are certain constants that they could measure. And if there's no deviation from general relativity, those constants would be zero, but nobody can ever say it's exactly zero. So they place a constraint on it, and they say it's less than this very small number. Does that
Okay, so they
make sense?
they
So that's what I
adjusted
meant
your
by-
formula with
Yeah.
some constraints within it. Okay.
Yes.
But speaking of your formula, I wonder if you could go back to that slide and just say in words what that bottom formula is.
Oh, the one on the bottom?
Yes.
Well, this describes the effects for gravity. Everything else is for standard model of particle physics. This is
Could you actually say what it means, including the alphas, the pluses?
Oh, you wanna know?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I
you
want to
want
hear
details.
it. Yeah.
This is a volume integral space-time.
Okay.
This is this R and 3 R's that you see here are represent the curvature of space-time. This lambda here is the cosmological constant. I don't know if this means anything.
So if you were to say that, would it be 1/2, what is that little k at the very bottom? 1/2 k to the f to the...
That's a constant.
Okay.
Which actually it's related to Newton's gravitational constant. It tells you how strong gravity is.
So could you read?
Yes.
Yeah, you said that Einstein was right. However,
So far, yeah.
well,
To within
I
the
thought
limits of
based on
experiments.
standard biographies of Einstein, Einstein says God doesn't play dice, and Bohr says don't tell God what to do and not to do. I thought Einstein's problem was that he was trying to find more predictability than it really was, and models and coherence to describe the universe, and maybe that's not the right approach. So I was kind of surprised you said Einstein was right.
He wasn't right about quantum mechanics. Because the quantum theory is as far as we know, is correct. So he was right about his theory of general relativity. That's what I meant.
Our next speaker is Dr. Curtis James from the Meteorology Department in the College of Aviation. His research areas are mesoscale, radar, and mountain meteorology.
Well, thank you very much. I figure since Quintin had to stoop, I'm just going to hold the microphone in my hand. So, I decided not to talk about myself too much today. I kind of wanted to focus on some things that I've learned through. I've just discovered the beauty of involving undergraduates in research, and I have about 4 right now, 4 undergraduates that I'm mentoring. And I've learned some do's and don'ts and some whys and hows that I wanted to pass on to you. Some of the things that we're just doing, and just to give you a brief overview, is we're researching the effects of mountains on wind flow. And we looked at the December 7th, 2009 windstorm that here in Prescott that produced 78 mile per hour wind gusts, and we did some model simulations of that. And I'll be going to Switzerland this summer as a visiting scientist researching how mountains can produce flash flooding in certain local areas. And those are just some of the topics that we're looking at, and we'll be presenting some of the results from that in upcoming symposia and workshops and so forth. But what I want to talk about today are why undergraduate research is such a win-win situation for the student and the faculty. And some guidelines for those of you who might be considering involving undergraduates in research, or I noticed there are students that were invited to come today. So what you might consider if you were to do some projects with the faculty as your mentor, and how we might be able to increase undergraduate research activities here. The Council on Undergraduate Research defines undergraduate research as an inquiry or investigation conducted by an undergraduate student that makes an original, intellectual, or creative contribution to the discipline. And by the LEAP initiative is considered one of the top 10 high-impact practices for undergraduate education. And for underrepresented students, Brownell and Swanner said that it's the most frequently and effectively used high-impact practice. And we already have many capstone courses here at Embry-Riddle that involve undergraduate research. How does it benefit the student? First of all, you can strengthen your resume. You can explore some of your career or academic interests already as a student and sort of refine your education as you gain more knowledge and experience. You can partner or network with industry. You may have some sort of applied research project with some industry contact that might help to put your foot in the door. You might improve your interaction with faculty members and learn from their wisdom and experience. Obtain a higher level understanding. You know, research is sort of one of the highest levels of learning because it synthesizes and applies all the concepts you've learned in class. It enhances your self-confidence in your field, communication skills, critical thinking, computing skills. I know our students have a lot of computing challenges and they're starting to do research, problem-solving skills, and then they get to feel the joy of actually discovering something new. To the faculty, we get, well, of course, there's part-time wages possible too through certain funding opportunities, which I'll talk about. Benefits to faculty, we get cheap labor. We get the help of having a student. What better employee than a student who's as enthusiastic as we are about the topic we teach and that we're researching to be able to help us. And we also, as faculty, get more satisfaction. We feel more effective because we feel like we're teaching our students more than they're just learning in the classroom. We get increased research output. Since we have such a heavy teaching load here at Embry-Riddle, it makes sense to sort of divide up the labor on some of the projects we're doing and have the students working on that. It benefits them, it benefits us. Gets more research done. And strengthen ties with our student employers. If you have ties with the industry and doing some applied research, it opens doors. We currently have a student who's doing an internship with the Met Office with Southwest Airlines, and the person who hired that student is someone that we're doing some applied research with. And so I think that some of that applied research we're doing can open the doors for an internship. Improve interaction with students, benefit from their enthusiasm and their inquiry and discovery. It kind of helps to motivate us as faculty as well. And it helps to improve retention and attract higher caliber students. What are some of the challenges of doing undergraduate research? I find that we sometimes start out research projects with kind of a idealistic view of what we're going to accomplish, and when we get down to the nitty-gritty, it turns out that we bit off more than we can chew. So I think we need to be careful to make sure that the project is appropriate to the student's level. The student needs to take ownership of the project. If they feel like that if they don't do it, then the faculty member is going to pick up the slack, then perhaps they don't have the level of commitment they need. Sometimes it takes a lot of motivation on the student's part if they're not getting a grade, if it's a paid research and it's not part of a course. Then there's less motivation, especially when it gets to the writing. It gets kind of bogged down, or some of the other mundane tasks of research can bog a student down. So you've got to be careful to keep up that level of motivation. Using proper scientific inquiry, objective techniques of analysis is very important. There's always a learning curve. Undergraduates have to learn how to use all the computers, the programming languages and so forth. By the time they're ready to graduate and you have them trained and they're good researchers, then they move on and you don't get the product that you want. Whereas with graduate students, that problem isn't so prevalent. We all have heavy workloads. The students not only have classes, they're working on our research projects, but they may have part-time jobs. They go home for the summers and vacation, and that makes it difficult sometimes to get the results we desire. Sometimes, I know one of our challenges we have in the meteorology department is having proper support for especially Linux computing systems. We're good at PCs here at Embry-Riddle, but our Linux systems are kind of lacking in support. And then obtaining publishable results. Sometimes the results we get from undergraduate researchers may not be high enough quality or cutting edge enough that we think would be publishable in a journal. So I think overcoming that challenge might be just dividing up the tasks that you have reasonably that an undergraduate can accomplish, and the faculty sort of picks up the slack where the students can't maybe produce the research we want. So there's some opportunities too. If a student consider approaching a faculty and asking them if it's a faculty that has similar interests to yours. Say, hey, do you have any projects I could work on? Do you have any funding? I'd love to do some research with you. I'm sure the faculty member would be thrilled to take on, especially if you're a good, motivated student. We sometimes, if the student isn't as motivated or isn't as knowledgeable about topics, we're more reluctant to take on that responsibility of mentoring them. But if a good student, we're always very anxious to take on that responsibility and that opportunity. For faculty, an idea that I had is when you go to a conference or a workshop and you meet someone from industry, ask them if they have a problem in their field or in their operations that you could get a student working on that they could benefit them somehow. And I find that they're always thrilled. Oh, we have so many problems that we could task you with to help us, improve our operations. So sort of an applied research, and that opens doors for internships. It's just a great opportunity. That's, as an example, what we did with the Southwest Airlines. Wait, one more thing here. We can also, as faculty, proactively seek out students and identify some tasks that a given student might be able to work on. There are various funding opportunities to help pay for students, so they get part-time pay while they're here. One would be an internal research proposal for a student research proposal to $4,000 per fiscal year per student is allowed. Some of that goes to their hourly wage, but it also could go towards equipment or even travel if that travel is necessary for the data collection. It doesn't pay for travel to conferences, but it pays for some travel if they need it. NASA Space Grant, that's what I've been doing some of mine through. It's very straightforward to get a NASA Space Grant. Ron Madler is the PI on that on this campus. And then external grants, NSF and other funding agencies are thrilled when you write in student employees or research assistants into your grants. This is just a scan of what it requires. If you're going to put in an ERU internal grant proposal as a student, this is the cover page. There's actually one cover page, a 6-page project description, 2 pages of student info, 4-page budget, up to 1 page references, and up to 5 pages of supporting documents. You can see that this is pretty involved, but I think it's good training for the students to go through a proposal writing process. And of course, it gets you up to $4,000 of funding. The NASA Space Grant is much easier process. The faculty member just writes a 1-page, like a 1 or 2 paragraph description of what they intend to accomplish, how many hours a week they need a student for, and what terms. And that's emailed to Ron Madler, and if he accepts that proposal, then the student fills out a 2-page application. It's very simple. I never had a proposal turned down by the NASA Space Grant. So that's a great way, and my students that are doing that at the end of the year take part in a symposium in Phoenix where they present their research. The Undergraduate Research Institute that Quintin talked about is just a proposal at this time, but it sounds promising according to what Richard said. Some of the goals of this research institute will be to provide a framework for undergraduate research, stimulate research leading to external grants, prepare students for high-profile internships, high-quality speakers and visitors could be somehow, we could fund their visits to our campus, and have an annual research symposium. The proposal is for $1.75 million over 5 years. That would also cover, of course, faculty and student pay and travel support. So that's part of the, maybe part of the QDP that we'll be putting forth to the administration. So in summary, undergraduate research is high-impact learning. It's a great opportunity. It's a win-win situation for the student and the faculty. I've had great experiences with it. Benefits, well, the funding, I should say, is available for student wages, so students actually earn money while they're doing research here at the university, and it also helps to pay for equipment. So with that, I'd like to open up to questions or comments. I don't consider myself the expert on undergraduate research, but I really enjoy getting involved, and I will continue to increase my research activities through undergraduate research projects. So, thank you.
Are there any questions of Curtis? Kate?
I just had a little question. I know you haven't presented the findings yet in Switzerland. Is that where you're going? What did you find, preliminary findings of that 78 MPH wins here in Prescott?
Yeah, we've looked at similar studies in the past for other wind events, one in Reno, Nevada, one near in Southern California. Seems that strong wind events like that here in the West could either be caused by mountain waves, where the airflow over a mountain barrier accelerates down the lee or back downwind side of the mountain, or it could be caused by the downward mixing of momentum, of higher momentum air from higher altitudes down to the surface. And then our computer model simulations, we determined that it was the latter case. It was where there was downward mixing of momentum. So the atmosphere was very marginally unstable, so that promoted the higher momentum air to be mixed down to the surface, allowing the stronger winds. The winds in that case were amazing. At the 10,000 foot level, the winds were like 80 knots sustained. And some of those winds mixed down to the surface, producing wind gusts up to about 75 to 80 knots at the surface. So, yes?
I just want to say thank you, Curtis, for focusing on the undergraduate research topic that we will be following, exploring, developing, and then working with for a number of years. So I think it's very exciting, and it's something that I think we'll all learn from a lot, and we have the opportunity to develop some whole new, different aspects of Embry-Riddle, and to show them off some, and to become part of that larger conversation that you're talking about regarding all kinds of research.
And thank you, Jamie, and also Michele, who's done a lot of the
Yes.
groundwork on this. I think it's really going to transform us for the better to involve undergraduates more and more in research. I think it benefits all of us.
I have another
Abby?
weather question, Curtis.
Okay.
Somebody told me that Williamson Valley receives more precipitation because of Granite Mountain. Is that true?
That is true. In mountainous terrain, there's a lot of different effects that control how precipitation falls. One of the ways is, as air flows up over a mountain barrier, it creates snowflakes or ice crystals that have a fairly slow fall rate. And so if you're on the lee side of a small mountain like Granite Mountain or some of these other, by small I mean compared to large mountain ranges, then on the lee side of the mountain, those snowflakes fall out for a certain distance on the downwind side. So if you go to Williamson Valley, you see there's more vegetation there than in Chino Valley, for example, which is almost the same elevation. It's because you're closer to where the fallout of those precipitation particles is. Yes?
Just a question for the students, and I think you mentioned you're working with more students. And on one of your slides, you said that we're looking or would consider adding a research methods class. in your experience, are you seeing that some classes were more helpful for your students to have had, and I'm thinking, have they taken research methods, have they taken statistics? What are you seeing in terms of the curriculum prior to their experience of working that's been especially helpful?
Well, for us, I think computing is an important skill for the undergraduate research that we're doing. So if students and we encourage them and they're required to take at least one computer engineering or computer science course in our curriculum, but if we can encourage them to take more, that helps. Writing is always important. If they're a good writer, it's always very beneficial. I would like to see the addition of an additional course as is part of the QEP plan to have research methods where they learn sort of an objective research techniques where they can solve a problem in an objective sort of systematic way. I think that would help, just approaching a problem systematically. So, okay,
Thank you.
And I also did want to excuse Dorothea and Mark Sinclair. They're both at conferences this week presenting different talks, so that's why they didn't come today.
Our last speaker is Dr. Lestari from the Aerospace Engineering Department in the College of Engineering. Her research areas are structural health, monitoring, composite structures, and smart materials.
At first, I don't know what type of topic, so I just going to talk about my research. And I'm on the opposite side of Quintin here. Instead of like a lot of equation, theoretical, I'm more like experimentalist. So I made something, break it, take the data, and look at it, make sense or not, instead of like long equation. So what I'm trying to do here is like try to find or to identify damage in composite structures. So first, like, why composite structures? Because like the increased usage of composite materials, especially in aerospace area. For example, this Boeing 787, the newest Boeing, now consists of 50% of composites. If you look at this kind of the breakdown, different type of material that you use. The aluminum is usually at the edges as a stiffening, or for example, ice and stuff like that. All the black one here is carbon composite, and the blue is a carbon sandwich, and you can see another yellow, and if you look at the total composites, about 50%. Well, we use a lot of composite, but yet there are several properties or behavior of composite that we still don't understand yet, because like different layer, different orientation will produce different material property or different behavior, right? And since we don't understand much, it's not mature enough compared to metal, which is homogeneous, there's a lot of problems. Before we go there, I would like to give you example. This is like from November 2001, an Airbus, which is like, I think in New York, goes to the Hudson River, and it's also made of composite, the tail. And if you look at that area, this is the piece that comes off. This is composite carbon, and maybe due to kind of cracking or things that happen inside, and especially for composite, the damage is like what they call it barely visible, because that happened inside, and especially if you paint it, you cannot really identify, so it's more challenging than metal. So if you look at this, once it's break, it just completely break and then lose the stability, and then it can be catastrophic in this case. So the objective here is try to find and quantify fatigue damage. I'm going to focus on this time is for fatigue damage using wave propagation, using also the off-the-shelf sensor, piezoelectric sensor. Of course, the ultimate goal of structural health monitoring, you want to apply that continuously online so that you can always update the information of your structure, integrated to the structure, and also part of a bigger health management system of your aircraft. That's kind of like the big pictures of that. I'm going to just do a small part of that. So this is kind of like example. Ideally, if you have a lot of sensor, you have a data, and tell the pilot or maybe like the maintenance guy so that they know where to look for. The challenges, as I mentioned before, this is typical type of composite damages, and they are very barely visible, and also increased complexity due to anisotropic materials property. Anisotropic, that means like the property depend on the orientation instead of like metal material is like isotropic, which is not depend on the orientation of the fiber. And also other issues such as resolution, noise, reliability of data, and manufacturing scatter, because like non-homogeneous depend on how you made it. Maybe one person can make a higher quality, the other one maybe slightly off, or you have a lot of inclusion inside. That gives you a scatter band of your data in the composite. So this is the manufacturing process that we did for our specimen. So we make like just a panel, we put a sensor inside, some on the surface, the other one embedded inside, so it's kind of very tedious job. In the picture stop there, the student putting that sensor. The sensor is very small. There are two different sizes that we use. You can use as to excite the wave and also to receive the wave that we send to identify the damage. And this is the method that we're going to use for making the composite, which is vacuum assisted resin transfer molding. So we don't really, autoclave is when we cure or we cook the composite with pressure and high temperature. For this one, only high temperature but without the pressure. So it's maybe sometimes the property is slightly lower than using autoclave, but if we do that well enough or careful enough, we can also achieve a high quality composite. I think most industry try to do that because using autoclave is expensive because you need to have pressure and temperature. Using this one slightly cheaper, so they try to apply this one more so that we kind of reduce the cost for manufacturing composite. So this is the testing setup. It's just like using a fatigue machine. This is the mean amplitude and tensile stress ratio, and we use like 10 Hertz frequency for the fatigue. And we stop, we take the data along the way until it breaks. So I made the specimen, test it, break them, and collect the data, and try to make a conclusion of make sense of this data. All right, this is one of the data. Basically, I send a wave, that's the input, and this is the output at the other end. And if you don't have damage, you will have different pattern, and if you have damage, you may have slightly different pattern than that one. So this one is just sample of the input and the output. This one with the noise, this one after denoising, so much cleaner. It's easier to process after that. And the challenge is try to make sense of this sine wave like that. Can we extract information, or can we have a good information as where the location and maybe like how big, or is it like already critical or it's not? So that's the bigger challenge for this damage identification. So we try to use, like, for example, amplitude change. After this one is, I'm sorry for this very, very small there, maybe you cannot read. This is the cycle of the fatigue. That's the amplitude of the wave, and this is the speed of the wave, and this is again the cycle after several cycles, because after several cycles, the structure getting weaker and weaker, and at the end it will break at this number of cycles, in this case about 200,000 cycles. So if you look at from the beginning, it drops a lot, and it's almost constant, or it's very, very slow, reducing in the term of amplitude. However, for the velocity here, you have like ups and downs. It may be because the wave changed modes or interaction between different waves, as if the velocity increased again like that. So there's a lot of factor and information in there that you need to extract before you can say whether your structure is safe or not, or something happened inside. This is another thing that we did using wavelet transform. Basically, we tried to look at the contour area and before the fatigue and after the fatigue, and try to make sense of the changing and relate with the damage that's happened in the structures. So that's one of the techniques. And again, we try to look also what's happened inside. If you look at this, this is under the microscope. If you look at this, this is the fiber orientation parallel to that direction, and this one which is perpendicular to the plane like that. And this one before the loading, you don't see much of cracking, but only 1 kilocycle, that means only 1,000 cycles, you can only see already cracking inside there. Which is without microscope, you cannot see that. So that is something happened inside, but you cannot see using just your own eyes. So you need some kind of help, some kind of tool to identify whether this is damaging or is it still okay, or you need to be cautious about your structures. As you increase, so that's called a transfer cracking because in the transverse direction. And this is again at 14,000. You can see you have more cracking. I hope you can see that. And this is during the unloading. That means the crack may be closed a little bit. And here, if you load, that means you pull a little bit. You can see more crack in there that you can see. Transfer cracking. On top of that, after a certain cycle, you develop different type of damage, which is, if you look at on the top there, there is a black line. That's kind of like debonding or delamination of your composite. So as the fatigue increasing the number of the cycle, you will have more type of damage and more damaging into your structures. And the delamination can grow and break the whole thing and damage the structures. So what we're trying to do to quantify all the cracking using the wave and using the signal, hopefully we can identify and learn from that, and then can say like, okay, if you reach certain number or certain value, you need to stop or to change or repair or change the whole structures. That's the idea. So the summary of this project, that means using this method, we can identify some damage. However, we still need to correlate whether those quantity or in the signal can relate with the physical damage, in this case the transfer cracking and delamination. And this proof is still in progress because we need to do some more testing, tensile testing, but at least we can see in the change of contour area can be used to represent the progression of fatigue, and we just need to kind of like correlate and maybe quantify based on other physical damages. So this is still ongoing. Hopefully this year we can wrap up with this part and maybe write some more paper on this one. In the meanwhile, I would like also to show some other type of damages in aircraft. Of course, this one's the famous Aloha Airlines. This one is not composite, but it's due to the fatigue in metal. So it's like 1/3 of the fuselage roof or top gone. But this is only one fatalities in this case, so which is better than the first one that I show you. But still, you don't want to be in this flight, right? The next one is, this is due to weather or hailstorm. So maybe Curtis can help with that if avoid this bad weather. So bad weather can damage aircraft really badly like that, especially for hail, like big ball of ice. Again, this one is metal. I cannot find something in composite that's available online. So this one is type of damages, failures, and this is a little bit gross. I guess it's the bird impact. Poor birdie. I guess this is a big bird compared to the airplanes, right? So bird strikes is also a problem in aircraft. Imagine if bird get in or suck in into the engine, it will damage the propeller, and then if the engine failure, you don't want to be in the aircraft with one engine or no engine at all, right? One more thing, it's interesting pictures. It's an accident waiting to happen. That's a flock of birds following an airplane near an airport in Hungary. Imagine if one of the birds got sucked into this and then damage the propeller or the nozzle or stop the engine. So that's also not, I think that will be related with wildlife around the airport, which is one of our colleagues also doing some type of research on that one, right? So that's it about some damages and failure in aircraft. Hopefully we don't have to experience that. So that concludes my talk. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer that. Yes.
Do they know what caused the crack on the
Which one?
American Airlines Airbus?
The Airbus?
2001, yeah, in the tail, the very first one.
Oh, the first one?
Yeah.
They speculate that the log, where is it? Yeah, this one. Yes, this one, it may have some kind of crack and fatigue, so it vibrates. And on top of that one, maybe already has some damage inside. And they also speculate during the takeoff. This is, I think, during the takeoff. And almost at the same time, there is an airplane that kind of like tried to land. And they are kind of close to each other, very close to each other. So the vortex from the other one hits that and increase the vibration and also increase the load in here that exaggerate that and then crack. So it's not only from inside, but they speculate also because you have need a certain distance between the landing and takeoff, and apparently kind of like slightly too close, and the vortices kind of like increase the vibration of the tail and increase the, maybe it create some kind of resonance or increase the load in that, and then snap and fail the tail and then lose the stability and then plunge into Hudson River.